Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us here on the broadcast. Your time is all appreciated. Still taking the accounts of stakeholders in the education sector, and of course those who are at the center point of what the report contains that was handed over to the President. Dr. Purity Ngina is a researcher with Zizi Afrique. Anthony Manyara is the President, Kenya University Students Organization. Isaac Kithiaka is the Junior Learning at Consul Opticum, and Angela Mburu is a student leader at the University of Nairobi. Angela, I come to you. What do you think of the leadership at the universities?
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity to provide the students with student representatives that can be involved in students' discussions and decision making within the universities to ensure that the students' voices are heard. Yeah. Okay.
Isaac, I come to you because in the context of talking about the transition here, because the report roughly touches on the general education sector in the country. It's not only confined to what ought to be happening in the framework of the competency-based curriculum or only higher learning institutions, because CBC also and the cohort inform the universities as well. Then is the time frame provided by the report of the 6 years for the universities to receive the first cohort enough? And do you think that the higher learning institutions will be prepared for that assignment?
I think it is important that before we even think of the 6 years, sensitization to the learners currently should start now. Before the 6 years come to the start or the end, there is that progress of understanding of the new changes and the new reforms of the education system to avoid the backlog of younger people or older people within the learners getting lost and not understanding what the reforms mean to the country and to their education.
And do you then think, owing to the challenges that, because the report also points out or highlights the challenges that are at the universities in terms of its leadership, the structure, and the model, I mean, do you think they are saying or they have an understanding of what's coming their way in terms of, you see now the challenges we have at most junior secondary schools or even senior is the sets of uniform, the confusion that was there around whether they will be placed at a secondary school, and then there was the directive that they remain at their present school, the change of uniform, the problem with the infrastructure in terms of laboratories and other equipments that are needed. Do you think this is also a challenge that the universities can forestall in terms of making sure that they take advantage of that window period of the 6 years?
Definitely. I believe because of young people, we are more connected to media and we understand the digital space. As a way to reduce the pressure on the government, I think young people can take the initiative to create a space where they talk about education and they speak about the new reforms to now sensitize people before these changes are made by the government, and as a way to create more awareness among the youth, because it's unfortunate that young people are not engaged in this conversation, and those who are engaged find it difficult to engage others. And I think because of our competency and experience and interest in digital media and platforms, social media to be precise, it would be more advantageous to the country and understanding of the CBC and the changes if we took more time to create innovative ideas and share what the education reforms are about. Yes.
Dr. Ngina, as a trained teacher, what we are going to have is 2633 that will majorly revolve around communication and collaboration, citizenship, learning to learn, self-efficacy, digital literacy, imagination, and creativity. While that will be a requirement on the end of the learners, teachers are also required to change from norm reference, for example, to criterion reference, and that is a very important training. How then, what will be the point of convergence of imbuing into the minds of the learners communication, collaboration, critical thinking, and problem solving, imagination and creativity, and also training the very same teacher who was trained previously to also issue the same at the university? How key is that, and will that symbiosis work to yield students and Kenyans who in the end will be competent enough and will fit into the job market?
I've spent around now 3 years learning about these core competencies at the CBC, the 7 core competencies and the values, and even thinking about how do we develop them and how do we assess them. And if you look at the framework from the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, the design talks about integration. So when you are teaching mathematics, for example, you're supposed to also help the learners develop critical thinking, problem solving, and to be imaginative and creative. Of course, it's not easy because the assessment framework has not been finalized. About how do you assess some of these competencies. If you're teaching mathematics and you are supposed to teach collaboration, how do you come back and say, okay, I was able to nurture purity from this level to this other level, which is very complex, in my opinion, after spending some 3 years trying to think about and learning how do you assess these competencies. And that is why I feel we need a paradigm shift, especially on our pedagogical approaches. You know, how you instruct in the classroom. Because when the CBC came, one of the bigger vision was to unmute the classroom, where the teacher doesn't have the monopoly of knowledge, such that the learners themselves are creating their learning environment and their own learning experiences. Has that happened? I think we still have some strides to make, because if you're told these things are integrated, it is easy for a teacher to teach the content. You know, I'll be there, teach maths and chemistry, and forget about the core competencies. So it is a teacher first to actually change their attitude towards some of these competencies, to understand these capabilities and their importance. Why that, if you look at SDG 4.7, it talks about some of these competencies, the way they are very critical, and they're going to help live a cohesive environment. And I was actually reflecting on this issue of categorization of school, and just also thinking, how does this affect, and what are the demerits? Because everything has positive and it's negative. One of the things is that there is a likelihood of a person to go to primary school in the same area. Yeah. Because now we have the comprehensive school. So you're going to pre-primary, you go to grade 1 to grade 6, you go to junior secondary in the same school, and maybe you go to the senior school next to your place. And now that in our counties we have university, you also go to the university in your county. So you're likely to finish all your basic education and also higher education in the same area. So how can we ensure that this youth is now a global and a Kenyan citizen? What are these skills that are needed? I think citizenship, which is one of the core competencies at the CBC, need to play a very important role. We need to think of how to teach it even separately, so that people can also understand the importance of why, even if I'm trained in Mount Kenya region, I have people in the Nyanza region that are Kenyans. How do we have this shared view of who we are as a people? And I think that is it's very critical. So you asked me the question, where is the convergence between what is happening and the teacher? And I'm happy that the reform says that every teacher to go back to school. So if I was going back to teach, I need to go back to be retooled, to understand the new ways of instructing, because I think it's a very new space. Allow our teacher to take time to learn. But also I was asking, where is the motivation? What will motivate me as a teacher to go back to school? I was looking at people like engineers. They go for training and you earn some points, some points that say, okay, you can maintain your certificate after going for these conferences, after doing these courses, after doing this work. So we need something like that for teachers. So it's not just a one-off, so that every year, every teacher feels the need to go back to school. But then even if you're going back to school, you also need to know, where is my progression in terms of my pay grade, my job group, not pay, my job group. Do we have that framework already in place? I'm sure no, but I think the TSC needs to work on something like that will motivate teachers to continue going to be retooled on these matters of CBC. Okay,
Anthony Manyara, and this is based on experience. It's that a large share of the HELB loan normally goes to people from households that, in terms of the socio-economic scale, that are in a better position than those from vulnerable or needy households. And here there is a categorization of the same. And the proposal to merge the funding board, and the 6 will be appointees of the Education Cabinet Secretary. That is how the new board will be looking like, and the funding placement will be the directorates. Others are principal secretaries or representatives from higher education, and that of TVET. Also, the board will be a representative of the vice chancellors and principals of colleges and private universities, the secretary of the commission, the chief executive of TVETA, and 2 persons with finance knowledge, 1 from colleges not under the Ministry of Education. The 6 will be appointees of the Education Cabinet Secretary. There were challenges with health, and this is a new proposal.
Yeah.
In this framework, there is no representation of the student leadership. I mean, how will this yield better targeting to reach those who need the funding more for them to access higher learning in Kenya?
Ayub, thank you so much for that question. I think I have gone to very many interviews addressing the same issue. The problem we have in Kenya is that people sit in somewhere, they make decisions for us, which is not right, because all these changes you make, for them to be implementable, for them to be, on course, you need to involve the key stakeholders. The issues that do with education, they involve students. Now, if we have incorporation of HELB, Universities Fund Board, KUCCPS, all these bodies, if there's no representation of students, how then will you know where where it pinches most? So my proposal was this. We have even lobbied severally to have students represented in the HELB board, so that whenever we have issues, those senior people, even the CS, is able to understand what students are going through. But they have never really done so. Our fear right now is that even the policies that they may come up with, the frameworks, the proposals that they may even table to Parliament, if there's no representation of students, then you will not be able to know really the issues that the students face. Now, I just want to remind us that the United Nations Agenda 4 emphasizes on quality education. If you look at the spirit of Vision 2030, also emphasizes a lot on education. Our own constitution, if you go to Article 43, 1F, it emphasizes to have everyone as a de facto right to education. It goes to Article 55, Article 56. This is a serious emphasis on education. Now, who are the key stakeholders of education? A university vice chancellor cannot dictate everything that happens in the university. We even proposed to the Working Party to ensure our institutions, normally we shouldn't have only professors becoming vice chancellors. Their resumes should have incorporation of managerial skills. They should be able to be managers. Sometimes we feel like, in some of the universities, we feel like it's like the vice chancellor, or rather the university administration, is only addressing staff issues. It's always a war between staff and students. Whenever you're supposed to have some kind of coexistence, that kind of disconnect should be able to end. This is a new regime, and I so much thank the President, His Excellency Ruto, because these reforms are a product of the vision that he had in Beta. That is his manifesto agenda. And we expect serious implementation. And when we talk about serious implementation, we don't expect, if we have flaws in the reports, they shouldn't be able to be ratified. We are able to make a few recommendations. They're supposed to be listened to. I'll just give you an example. Just the other day, we were doing public participation for affordable housing plan. I sat down. I remember that my students, some of them, are not even accommodated, and we have issues, rape cases in informal settlements. Some live in Kibra, others live in Mathare, various places. And sometimes the one who feels the pinch is the parent. We told them we need to have incorporation. Now that we have an affordable housing plan, which is in the agenda of the president, or rather the government, we should be able to incorporate students also, so that we can be able to, some of these universities have large tracts of land. We can be able to develop on those land. We can be able to have high-rise buildings whereby we can have studio units, whereby students can be able to be accommodated on a very low kind of rent, or rather we can even have government incentives and so forth. We were planning to have incorporation of affordable student accommodation. It has worked in Canada, it has worked in Sweden, it has worked in United States. this is something we are looking at it progressively, and we can be able to do it.
Okay.
And I'm happy because the CS was well supportive. Even PS Hinga, he gave us an assurance that those are kind of things we can be able to look going forward.
Okay. Isaac, looking at this reform that is proposed in the report, especially from the funding perspective, do you think it can strengthen and help the design and the operation of the new funding model that the report and the task force had proposed?
Yes, I believe that Kenya is quite liquid. I believe that Kenya has the potential to streamline and focus on development. And in this case, education, which is a strong pillar in our country, I believe if the government wanted to strengthen the education in our country, then they definitely have that financial strength and financial muscle. I'd just like to comment on Dr. Manyala's comments. He mentioned that students are not participating, or there's no incorporation of young people and students within these discussions. But I'd also like to pose the question, the students as well are quite negligent. Sometimes our young people, or us young people, decide to not take initiative. And I think this brings out another issue that could counter what the incorporation issue that Dr. Manyala is raising.
Okay.
Yes.
And Angela, what do you think about that? In terms of the student leadership, what do you think would change? And do you have any anything you would want to say as a student leader in regards to that?
Yeah, I would like to add on what Isaac has said, that between the public and private universities, we could also have some sort of resource sharing, which could include databases and even equipment. And this could help pull together expertise from various fields, or maybe just engineers together, and if they're engineering students together, yeah, and like share knowledge.
Yeah, and feel comfortable, okay?
Yes.
Yeah, proceed with your point. Make up your point. Please proceed, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, overall, this could lead to like solutions and ground-breaking discoveries.
Of course, you can refer to your notes. Please feel comfortable. Yes, refer to your notes and make your point. Please proceed.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Anthony.
I wanted to add something very pertinent, and I know very well if I don't address it, I'll have a very serious kind of backlash when I go back to my students. I think these kind of proposals that have been advanced by the government, some of them are extremely very good. Look at the university's funding model. We expect to see how it can be able to be implemented with honesty, so that that student who is affected most can be able to get that funding, can be able to get that bursary, can be able to get, subsidized school fees, can be able to get that help. Now, another issue which I saw extremely very much important, and it was left out, we expect to see how the government is concerned about transition. Very many students are graduating, they are terming for several years, and I feel like it is very bad. You know, we normally say that you cannot pickpocket a naked man.
Yeah.
Now, our students go to the job market, and it is a shame that some of the private companies, parastatals, even some government parastatals, and also government agencies, they absorb students to come and do internships without paying them. Sometimes we ask ourselves, where will those students get even transport to go to their workstations? So I feel very bad, even on national TV right now, if the government can be able to come up with policies in which, if you're an employer, you're supposed to pay that attachee.
Yeah.
If it is an internship, they should be paid internships. I think the government should tell us. Now, I saw in this Working Party report,
Yeah.
there's a very good thing. They're saying that TVET institutions they will be linked directly to the job market, which is very good. What about graduates? I don't represent only TVET institutions. I represent also universities, both private and public. These students, sometimes they are so much in distress after they graduate. So we want to see how the government, because I've seen our President Ruto, is someone unpredictable. He can even come up with another ministry. Why don't you create a ministry that is attached to job creation and employment so that we can see our young people also getting jobs? Otherwise, these proposals will be able to produce people who are skilled but no jobs.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Ngina, in what looks like a shift from, of course it is a shift from the 844 system to what we'll be having, and then the universities, generally looking at the education sector as a trained teacher, and the head of state spoke to this during the Tuesday press news conference at State House about the competence that's needed. Because Kenya is a country that largely depends on its human resource. And clearly you have seen how he had linked the two. Is there equity in terms of access to education in Kenya? And how do you think our education system can address the inequity amongst Kenyans here?
Yeah, but before I jump to your question, allow me to mention something on community service learning, because I think now after you finish your degree, you'll be required to go for 1 year, I think, to do community service learning, which is quite interesting and new. I don't know how that look like. I want to learn more on, but I believe it's a very welcome move, because giving back to your community, understanding the issues more, you're able to develop solution to them. And also, even when you finish senior secondary, I think you're going for community service for 3 months or something like that. But is there equity? I think we have progressed in terms of equity, because if you look at, even start with gender, because issues to do with gender also touches on equity. We have gender parity in the basic education, primary, okay, the junior secondary level up to the basic education level. But when you go to the higher level, of course, we have seen in some courses you have men, and in some courses you have more women inclining to that. The only thing about equity is the issue of privatization of schools, because most of the parents who are able to they take their children to private schools. They pay for it. Are they paying for quality, or are they paying for relevance? I think the education is the same. So if it is relevant in academy, it's relevant in other places. But I think there's an element of quality that is there. So I believe that if we can give a quality education for all children, then equity can be addressed. In terms of resources, I'm happy that we no longer have categorization of schools with these new recommendations, that there is no national, there is no sub-county, because we used to have the national school receiving so much money just by the virtue that they are national schools from the government. And schools in my village, which are, which have masses of our learners, of our youth from the people at the lowest of the bottom, not receiving anything. So I believe that now that we have removed the categorization of schools, we are going to have every child accessing any education, depending on your area, on your strand, whether you want to go to talent, you're talented in music, arts, football, whatever, or you are a STEM person. But also I believe that there is also a lot of work to be done for that to be realized, because we only have 2 years for us to get to senior school. And in senior school, this is where people choose where they want to go, whether you want to go to art, science, and also the talent academy. I believe there's a lot of work the government needs to do to actualize this, so that we don't get to senior secondary, senior school, when we have not really understood what our learners are going to do there, and we don't have the necessary infrastructure. Yes, please proceed. There's also an issue of funding that I wanted to touch. At least now the university were given an opportunity to quote the amount that is required to train a student, whether it is engineering, it is in health. And that is very important, because what we have seen in the past, and I remember the deputy president at some point even mentioning some universities that are verge of collapsing, where the lecturers are not even being paid the 100%, just because they don't have resources. And now that they're able to quote that, for me to train a nurse, someone with a Bachelor of Nursing, this is the amount that is needed. I think we're going to see more quality in the university and more relevance. You know, they are going to offer an education that is quality and education that is relevant to the 21st century. But also, we cannot wait for 6 years. We cannot say that we have to wait for 6 years to get the CBC learners coming to the university. What about these ones that are already in the university? They're already training teachers. They are teachers. They are the people training to be teachers already in the university. What are we doing for them to be ready to come out there and train CBC cohort? Because they won't wait for 6 years for them to get out and start training. They already, next year, they'll have probably TSC numbers. They will start training. How are we sure that we are now CBC compliant? I know there are many universities that have started thinking about the implementation of the CBC, but I think a lot has to be done, starting from the national level.
For the retooling of teachers, of course, like you, for the competency-based curriculum and the transition, and generally the universities needing more personnel for that and resources. It needs commitment in terms of resources, isn't it? And we're talking about 628 billion for the education sector.
Yeah.
Is that enough to cater for all the needs that we have talked about in terms of the infrastructure, in terms of setting up the junior secondary schools, in terms of the universities preparing for the next 6 years? Is that enough?
We're already spending 27.4% of our budget on education. So, of course, that is a lot of money. I think we need to understand the points where we can reduce, because I don't believe we now have resources to get to 30 to 40%. I think we can use what we have, we can optimize. But also I feel like teachers have a responsibility. Somehow I have read almost all the documents on CBC, and I'm not even teaching in the classroom, just because I feel as a teacher, I need to understand what is happening in the education sector. So where the teacher waits for some person to come and train, I think they also need to take their personal initiative. We are now talking about including digital and tech. So almost everything is now on our phone. You can also make a decision of retooling yourself. But also when I read the document, it says that they had planned to train 60,000 teachers on junior secondary, but they only managed 55,000. Of course, the document doesn't tell us what happened for them not to get to 100%. But 55 is still a small number, knowing that we have so many learners who are joining the junior secondary. So I think there's a lot of work that is needed. I don't think we might add more money, but what we have, we can work with it. But also people making a decision to know, I am a teacher. I have a responsibility to train these learners. So I need to take the initiative of understanding what is this CBC. And that is why for me, when someone say I don't understand CBC, I'm like, these documents are already loaded on the KICD portal. So why are you not reading more on what is needed? Because we need, as a country, we need to take responsibility of our actions. And every action you take has consequences. If you don't train those learners very well, they're the people who will start paying tax in 10 years' time. So who will maintain the country if we don't train our children?
The human resource that the head of state spoke to.
Yeah.
Okay. Isaac, we are talking about 1.2 million grade 7 learners, and the Teacher Service Commission had carried out the teacher recruitment exercise across the country in order to bridge that deficit, because these learners will also inform us the universities wait for them. What then do you think should be done by the Ministry of Education? And here's where the implementation matrix comes in, because it still is the implementer. That's the organ. What then do you think can be done to fasten in order to bridge that teacher deficit for this cohort to be properly imbued with education and knowledge that is required before they transition to the university?
Thank you for that question. I believe that learning does not take place in school only. I believe that you can learn outside of school, at home. And as a way to prepare those 1.2 million teachers, parents and community-based learning can be integrated into the frameworks, which will help and assist the government as they prepare for these teachers who are going to take these new students for grade 7. I think shifting away from traditional school learning and everyone becomes a teacher is a better way of fastening learning and improving the quality of learning and education in our country. Yes, thank you.
Anthony, because this all boils down again to the merger of universities, one of the key recommendations made in the report by the task force, which now wants the government to develop guidelines for merging of universities. It argued that the guidelines will still help in identifying institutions that were deemed not viable. I mean, then how is an institution not viable? Is it because we have seen campuses closing for some universities? What's the main reason that causes that?
Ayub, I think that is something which we even proposed, or rather we proposed to the Working Party, and we have made it several even before the Working Party, even when there was BBI, we also proposed the same. We were envisioning a country whereby we don't have so many universities, both public and private. You only need a few, maybe like 10 or 15 at most, because some of these, or rather if you have like those 10, then we can have subsidiary colleges, those kind of institutions. Then we have a lot of TVET institutions. Why have so many institutions when we cannot be able to take care of the already universities that we have? Remember, here outside the job market, there's a university which you say you are coming from, and the employer looks at you like this, and then he wonders whether he can give you the job or not. So I feel like it is a mandate of the government to see how best to reduce the number of universities. We can have, actually, progressively, we can have some universities specifically dealing with law, others dealing with sciences, others dealing with agriculture. We have seen some universities like, let's say, Moi. They do very well with law. If you come to University of Nairobi, they do very well with sciences. So I think what we are looking at in these educational reforms is sustainability. When I was in architecture school, we learned about sustainability of buildings. Whereby you look at the environment, you ensure that that building is tailored to marry with the entire ambience environment, so that at least the building can be able even to breathe, to ensure that you live in a sustainable kind of environment. Now, the same case with this CBC. We need to see whether teachers are trained, are they paid well? We need to see whether there is enough money even to cater for the equipment to sustain the learning. We need to see whether there is smooth transition. If they are saying there is 3 months of training from high school to tertiary institutions, if there's that 9 months, there's a lot of money that is involved in these proposals, or rather in the proposed budget. But how will it be implemented in a sustainable way without people, stealing all the money, embezzling funds? We have seen that has been the order of the day. But we are still optimistic. Okay. We are still optimistic.
Going forward. Okay. Let's sample the feedback from the viewers, and then Daktari and also Angela will be in a position to respond to what the viewers are saying, and majorly, of course, learners from high learning institutions in the country. The hashtag on Twitter is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422. At Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdi Kadir. Here's what we have. Brian Chemwa says, enhancing university governance and accountability mechanisms to promote efficient decision-making, financial transparency, ethical conduct, student-centered higher learning education system, and better leadership. Kenya University Student Organization is a political organization that needs replacement. Clement Koreme says the government should focus on STEM courses with employment opportunities because education is the greatest equalizer. HELB loan should never be delayed. That's our source of livelihood at the university. Engineer Lazaro says reforming public universities into powerful research centers and disease control institutions will require a vibrant CS for education. He means who is ready to do things different from the status quo. The government should always stop tribalizing everything. Bob Otieno Owino says there will be recommendations after recommendations because the recommendations which were handed to the president showed that the competency-based curriculum has failed in every sector. Excuse me. The only remedy is to revert back to the old system until proper channels are met. Sir Nixon Ndugure says, otherwise, it's very true that real educational reform is essential if today's and tomorrow's children are to live in a more peaceful, just and sustainable world. And Babu Michelle K says this policy that was introduced by the previous government about sponsoring students to private universities was a good one and brought some sense of equity. Hope this government should have seen some sense on this and make it continue. Ole Shonko says, my concern would be the glaring output of students we are having from higher institutions, but the job market can hardly absorb them. The Deputy President is on record saying this. Why would there be investment on this CBC and there are no jobs? Godi Barasawere says the Kenya Kwanza administration needs to cast a sharp focus on the education sector and do a deep dive scrutiny on where or the same sector needs improvement. Reforms in this critical docket must be carried out. We'll sample, of course, the remaining feedback from you in the next 15 minutes when we'll be done with the broadcast. And Isaac, what's your feeling on the responses from the viewers?
I believe that we should have a bit of faith in the government. We should have a positive outlook and we should look forward to the changes. I believe that progress takes time and we should be patient as we see the changes that the government are trying to make. Thank you.
Okay. Daktari, as you respond to the question about the continuity of, some still are concerned about the competency-based curriculum because of what it involves and the input it does require. There are still some who think that we should continue with the old system, but here we are with this new system of education. Going forward, do you think, as posed by one of our viewers, it can cure some of the problems that we have as a society and as a country?
I think CBC is a very progressive curriculum. Especially the aspect of these core competencies, because it is you becoming a critical thinker or a problem solver that you're able to either create your own job or create jobs for the others. So I believe that if this is well implemented, it is going to create youth that are ready for this century, that are able to either work best, create more employment for others, and do what and live a thriving life. Because I think education should give you that. But there's also something that I feel is of importance. If you read a lot of documents from the World Bank on education, we have something now we are calling the learning poverty, where learners in Sub-Saharan Africa, 9 out of 10 learners in Sub-Saharan Africa are not reading at the age-appropriate level. Meaning that you can have someone going up to the whole system of education, but they are not able to either do basic mathematics or read a basic text, which for me is worrying. But I'm happy with the recommendations because now they have talked about the catch-ups, because they're very important to think about how do you accelerate the learning of those people who are left behind. That you go to a classroom, you are in maybe grade 7, but you're not able to tackle grade 3 mathematics or grade 3 text, which is a big issue. So the fact that they are now proposing accelerated learning program, we now need to think of how do we implement that. It's something they touched on the community, that education should not just be happening in the classroom. I think the CBC envisioned where the parents play a very important role. The KICD were able to give us parental empowerment and engagement guidelines, but what we don't have is implementation. I myself as a parent, what is my role? Most of the time our roles are always limited to either basic provision, taking our children to school, and sometimes disciplining. Right? But there's a lot of work we can do that is beyond the assignment that the parents. If you look at the document, and I was happy that the Presidential Working Party on education reforms, people were very honest. They were saying that parents said, you know, our work is limited to now we are learning with our learners, we are doing homework and sort of some of other things. And many parents are very uncomfortable, not because they don't want, it's because they are not at the level where they even understand how to support their parents. So we need to understand what is the level of parental engagement and empowerment. What needs to be done? Me as a parent who has children, what is my role? What can I do? And what should be done by the school? So that I'm not just being called to school to either there's a parent meeting or to maybe, even when education is free, to probably send some money because of school feeding, which is not covered under the capitation. So I think there are some of the issues that are very critical that we need to ask ourselves. But also in the university, I know there are people saying that university funding, university leadership, and all those sort of things. I think university is a platform, is a place where people thrive. You don't just go to the university to become a teacher. It is a place that opens your eyes and make you connect and network with other people. So I think people should appreciate what is being done, what is happening, and also, of course, ask ourselves, how can we improve it? I think education, I don't believe that just closing university will be the solution if the quality is not improved. I saw even rechartering of TUM and TUK. Yeah. I don't know what that implies to the resources that are already in those technical college. But there's also something on TVET that is very important. Yeah. The duo, the part of the industry and the part of the college. That kind of cohesion between the industry and the classroom is very important, which is happening in various countries. I think in Europe, most countries appreciate such model, where you are trained in the school, but you go also to the university, to the industry, and you get some training, which allows you now to understand what is needed in the industry. Because researchers have said that we don't know the jobs that will be there in 2030. That the jobs that are there in 2030, we don't know them. We are not actually training our children for those jobs because we don't know what is needed then. And that is why these competencies become very important. Because if you train me to be an imaginative being or a creative being, it means I can survive. I can look at the problems and think of the solutions. And if you look at one of the things, we know that all discoveries that have been made came from a question, someone questioning something. So if we are able to build learners who are problem solver, then I don't think the issue of employment will be, I mean, in 2035, when we have now the first cohort of CBC leaving tertiary education, I think we might see a different country, which for me is a welcome move. It is going to take long, but I think it is very progressive.
Okay, and I'll come back to you about the STEM question that women need to take. And talking about empowerment and the job market, the Deputy President is on record for telling graduates in one of the universities here that there are no jobs for you guys. Look, and then whether that, from the administrative policy perspective and the pronouncements made, and also the creativity needed from the learners to not depend also on white-collar jobs and rather be creative and imaginative, as you have mentioned. Yes, Anthony, you had a point.
Yeah, I've seen someone say that KUSO is a political organization, and I think it's very good also. I make it very clear to Kenyans that yes, KUSO is a political organization. We try as much as possible to involve ourselves in matters of politics, because politics affects even the air we breathe. And besides, comrades are barometers of wisdom and catheters of knowledge. Sometimes we try as much as possible to provide some touch, or rather to provide some direction for the country whenever there are matters which involve students, or rather if there are issues which the hoi polloi, or rather the common person, is affected. So we really speak for the voices of the oppressed. We speak for the voices of those who do not really reach to a point of airing their voices. He has also said that KUSO needs to be changed. And I think that was very lackadaisical. It is not, it is punitive. I think it's an idea which is beyond the point, because KUSO is the only organization which is left in the country to speak genuinely for students' grievances. So the only thing that we don't have is funding. And we even proposed to the Working Party to have at least 10 billion allocated to KUSO so that we can be able to run our affairs normally like any other government, because I believe KUSO is a government like any other, just like a county or even the national government. We have our own structures. We have governors. We have regional leaders. We have an executive. So these kind of operations, for them to be streamlined, then the government should see to it that everything goes as per any government would do. Yeah. And
what will then 10 billion do for you? What will be your target areas? Suppose that were a reality.
Ayub,
what problems will that address?
Ayub, you can see the students I represent, they are more than the number of students in the University of Nairobi. They are more than the number of students, they are more than the number of people in Nairobi. That is equivalent to like 3 governors combined. So I feel the kind of people we represent, there are so many. And they have very many issues. So for them to sort, there's need to have a budget, there's need to have a functional office whereby we can be able, like take for instance, the position I hold at the East African level, that is the East African Students Union. as the president. I have 2 offices. I have one in Arusha, another one in Bujumbura, in Burundi. It can show the kind of seriousness, how students are being taken seriously. Now in our country, I think sometimes students are just targeted by politicians here and there, and then you see how we have been able to be left out in various decision-making tables. We are not taken as stakeholders. That is what I've been pushing. Even in the universities, that is why we have a certain student can be able to be targeted by a certain lecturer, maybe for declining for some kind of advancements, maybe sometimes sexual favors, and you are surprised. All of a sudden, you have a E on your portal. Maybe you have like 5 supplementaries. You do retakes. Sometimes maybe you are expelled, maybe for another issue. If you are expelled, who is likely to intervene? We as KUSO, we do intervene. But they reinstate those students out of fear, because they fear that students maybe will demonstrate those kind of things. Sometimes we try as much as possible to sort disputes or other issues on a table using diplomatic issues. But when it goes overboard, then students have no any other solution rather than to demonstrate. But that's why we are saying we can be able to come up with changes whereby we don't have really kutumia kifua all the time. We need really to have policies which are in place to sort out those kind of issues.
Okay.
Thank you.
Isaac, on the messaging from the Deputy President during one of the graduation ceremonies that, look, you guys, there are no jobs for you, painting a picture of more or less a job market that is to the brim, no longer unable to absorb graduates despite their qualifications. However dejecting that was, is it not a challenge to the graduates to also be creative, get into entrepreneurship, and create jobs for themselves and also employ others?
Thank you again for that question. I believe there are 2 views that you can choose to take with this incident. You can choose to be motivated by this certain ideal, or you choose to take it as a reason to never act. I believe if you have the tenacity, or if you have the drive to solve your own solutions, or if you have the critical thinking of this is a problem and this I can find a solution, then even if the government says there are no jobs for you, or they don't create that hub for creating jobs, I think with young people we have that creative ability, and we have that self-interest and collaborativeness that we can pull each other together and see how we can find a solution. Because at the end of the day, even if the government had jobs for us, we need to take the initiative to go and work as young people. We have the energy. We are soon going to be carrying the nation one day. So we need to have that initiative of, yes, we can do something. And yeah, that's my answer. Thank you.
Okay. And Angela, I see you're looking at your notes. You have a point?
Yeah.
Yes, please, go ahead. Make your point.
So I believe what this whole issue is trying to address is bridging gaps between urban and rural areas, bridging gaps between the disparities that come up within the student results when they are out. Like, as a university student myself, I believe that the redirection of funding and prioritizing development in these higher learning institutions of like undeserved areas is a great way of achieving that. And although it's like a small sector, but within this last couple of years, like 2 years, online learning has been has made a very great step towards our day-to-day learning, and in a way we can improve that. I mean, the government should really focus on the infrastructure development of internet connectivity in these areas. I mean, as much as they are directing this funding to those parts, I mean, they should include that. They should also make sure that there is reliable access for the students to access these online resources, as well as training teachers in a way that they could engage students in virtual classrooms. Yeah.
Well put. Thank you. Dr. Ngina, then on the STEM question and the involvement of women, I mean, when you look at generally our societal makeup, they contribute more than half of the laborers in our farms. And then, for instance, you realize their economic output is also well. How will the taking up of STEM courses for the female gender important in the driving of our economy generally and the involvement in critical sectors of running this country?
I think the issue of women and gender, of course, many times when you mention the word gender, everyone just linked to the women, and sometimes you might be labeled as a feminist, yeah. Which is not a bad name, only that now the notation of the word brings the negativity of it. I believe that women need to be part of the conversation. You cannot leave half of the people out in the virtue that probably they were born female. But we have not, there are many other policies and other guidelines that really support women. We had the affirmative action. I remember when I was joining university in 2009, we had girls getting to join university even with lower points, which is not happening right now. And it's a big issue, because if our girls are not doing well in sciences, then you limit them. You cannot have them join the STEM courses. Mm-hmm. It means in this 21st century, we will not have girls joining the courses where there are jobs. Meaning, as you said, they would be left doing the normal jobs, yeah. That are probably not earning a lot of money. But I think something I appreciate is, what is the definition of a job? Because sometimes we look at a job as when someone else employs you. Mm-hmm. But the people who are in agriculture, in our villages, are they not contributing to this economy? The people riding border, they're also making actually they even make more than the people who are employed in some jobs. So I feel like we need to look at education in a broader term, that is supposed to develop a youth or a person who have the skills for living and living a thriving life. And thriving life is not a matter of getting someone to employ you. So that we demystify the notion that there are no jobs. Maybe the jobs that were meant are jobs that where someone, hey, we'll give you a job and every end month you get something. But you can use your skills, your creativity, your competence to do something that will give you a thriving life, which is more important than anything else that someone else can give you. Okay. But I think we need to think about STEM in a more critical way. It requires a lot of resources. We need laboratories for that to happen. You know, in the university, we need universities to become more researchers. I believe that there is more money that is needed, especially on the research docket, because these STEM courses requires a lot of resources. Okay. You need to be a researcher in the university to think through what is needed. How do we develop the best power system with the renewable, with the instability of the system? You know, I am not in engineering, but I know they talk a lot about instability, renewable energy, green energy. What does that look like? These recommendations talk about climate change, and actually one of the things they're saying that schools should they should move away from using wood to green energy. What does that look like? These youth should be the people helping us. What are the sources of power that can reduce in terms of the cost that we incur in these sort of things? So I think there are many ideas that young people can engage with, can try to support, okay. And see how best we move the education issue forward. And also, there's also something we didn't touch about now, NEC going to print exams. I think that is very interesting. We have always been fighting about exams. Of course, NEC is going to be called an assessment. Yes, it's printed outside the country. But even when it comes, we find exam leakage. So this is actually going to test our fabric as a country. That we are saying we are no longer going to give someone else to do our work. We are going to do it. But how we do this work diligently, with a lot of integrity, is something that all of us are going to be on the lookout. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Yes, Anthony, briefly, final comments on to you, Isaac.
Mine is very short. I just want to emphasize that the government prioritizes the issue of overturning the Duale bill, which has really affected our students. Number two, accommodation. there is no enough accommodation. We expect incorporation of students' affordable accommodation in the affordable housing plan that has been at the forefront of the agenda for the president. Number 3, we want to see how there could be a directorate of student affairs whereby their students can be able to access the government directly to sort out their issues, including expulsions, including unwarranted suspensions, yes, including issues to do with missing marks. Those are serious concerns which students have. Another issue is that we expect going forward, KUSO can be able to be institutionalized, to be a government on its own, so that students can be able to sort out their issues independently of the government.
Yes, Isaac.
Thank you, Ayub, again. Mine is quite short. I believe that there's a lot of talk when it comes to education and youth, that youth are not represented, but I'd also like to pose a challenge to fellow youths. Why are youths not taking the initiative to also be in that space? Because we cannot say that, oh, youths are not there, or youths are not integrated, when youths are themselves are not, taking the initiative. I think this ties back to what initiative and the understanding that we have the ability to gear the nation in a certain way and improve the quality of our education. Thank you.
Yes, Ajali, your final comments.
So to wrap this all up, there's some bit of mismatch between the skills that we learn in the university and the skills that are required in the workforce, so after we graduate. So a way that we could, a way that university students should embrace in combating this, and also the university heads and the lecturers, is integrating vocational training within our university student system. This way, it will cater to a wide range of fields and in turn equip students with skills and certifications that are required in the job market.
Thank you. Your time is appreciated. Dr. Piri Tingina is a researcher at Zizi Afrique. Your time is all appreciated. Daktari, thank you. Anthony Manyara is the president, Kenya University's Students Organization. Your time is appreciated. Isaac Kiviaka is junior learning at Consul Opticum. Angela Mburo is a student leader at the University of Nairobi. Up next is Level Up Friday, and here's what's coming up with DJ Roy T-Boy. And that is a setup outside the Royal Media Services and Atua Magari in Ohio. It's going to be a special edition of Level Up Friday that will be coming to you shortly. As you can see, the setup already ready, and DJ Roy T-Boy will be your driver for the next 1 hour. Here we go, and mixing about his stuff, and he will be hosted by Bensu. And it's our director's initiative to organize that. And what you're seeing at the moment of the cars edition of it. And Ibrahim will tell us more about that. Up next is a Level Up Friday with DJ Roy T-Boy. Many thanks for your time and company here on the broadcast. Much appreciated. We'll see you next week here on the broadcast on Daybreak. Thanks for watching. Good morning.